Hello everyone, and welcome to CultureCast. My name is Adam Murray, and I am here with
Colin Quisenberry,
Shannon Daly,
Ian Faber,
Katie Marchetti,
and Nina Reiser.
And in this episode, we will be discussing The Little School by Alicia Partnoy. Today we will be discussing many matters that pertain to The Little School. First, we will talk about its historical significance, then delve into the technical aspects of the book, discuss its themes, symbols, and motifs, and finally finish off with asking ourselves the question, why this book for this class? So without me talking too much, are you guys ready to begin?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, let's go.
Hi again, I'm Colin Quisenberry. Before we discuss the book, here's a little background on the author. Alicia Partnoy was born and raised in Bahia Blanca, Argentina. She studied humanities and liberal arts at the Southern National University, where she met her husband, and they were both Partnoyist youth movement activists fighting against the dictatorships and injustices in Argentina. On January 12, 1977, she was taken from her home while her husband was taken from work. She was held for 3 months in the little school and then moved to a prison. These disappearances during the Dirty War, which was started with a military junta which put Lieutenant General George Rafael Vindela in the place of President Isabel Perón. They shut down the National Congress, brought state and municipal governments under military control, as well as banned trade unions and imposed censorship. Vindela led the movement to round up and disappear suspected dissidents. The war was between the military and the leftist groups such as the Partnoyist youth movement. The war originally faced little opposition because leftist guerrillas had been active since the late 60s. In the late 70s, however, it started to lose justification, with a larger population seeing the human rights injustices. The Mothers of the Plaza de Mayo brought international attention to the disappeared with weekly vigils up until 2006 for the children who had been separated from their parents. Argentina had clandestine detention centers before the Dirty War. In 1975, there were only 2. By 1976, there were 610 centers. La Escuelita, or the Little School, was one of the original 2. The Little School is in Bahia Blanca in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The prisoners, including Partnoy, were kidnapped mostly at night and taken to a center where they were tortured. Their names were often taken away and replaced by numbers. They were treated like animals and often raped. These centers were temporary, with detainees being transferred after a few months. For many, this meant they were killed, but some, like Partnoy, were moved to prisons. Alicia Partnoy was sent from the little school to prison, and after being released in 1979, moved to the United States, where she was reunited with her husband and daughter Ruth. She is now a professor at Loyola Marymount University. She has shared her story at many conferences and is active with Amnesty International. She is active in human rights and fighting injustice, which can be seen in most of her works. That was a little history on the time period it was written, and now a little bit more on the book itself.
Hello everyone, my name is Katie Marchetti. My first topic today is narrative technique. The Little School is a pretty straightforward book. As we read this story, we gained experience and began to form our own expectations based on what we had already read. The short stories allowed us to take our attention away from the book when needed, because each story was separate from one another. Alicia Partnoy was indeed the author, but also the narrator. These are her stories, and as I read them, I of course believed everything she said. Right in the beginning, her dedication read, "In memory of Daniel, my brother, for whom life became so absurd that he decided to take his own." This made the story seem very personal. In class, our professor questioned the validity of the story. I began to question how truthful her words were and thought a lot about what I had just read. Yes, these are her stories, but she could have changed anything she wanted or added other stories because there aren't any survivors that can back up her words. We are told that Alicia leaves out a lot of parts to spare her readers from the gruesome details, allowing us to sort of let our minds run wild to some extent. In leaving details out, it gives Alicia the ability to change our perceptions of the conditions she was forced to live in. Next, I will discuss the characterization. The development of characters in the little school is all in Alicia's point of view, so as she narrates the story, we learn more about her than anyone else. She tells us her stories and explains the people she encounters in her point of view, forcing us to believe even more what she is saying. Graciela is the narrator of one story, but again, Alicia wrote the story, so it's written how she thinks Graciela experienced the little school, not her reality. Because the story mainly takes place in the little school, speech and dialogue isn't as apparent. There isn't much talking among the disappeared people. The main dialogue was by the people controlling the camp, yelling at all the prisoners to follow the rules and telling them what to do. There's a lot of brutality and punishment throughout the story, especially when caught talking. For example, when it rained, Alicia and Maria Elena took advantage of the loud raindrops to have a casual conversation, something they weren't allowed to do at all. They were caught in the act, and we are told how one of the guards used Chinese water torture on Maria Elena in Alicia's point of view. But this time she didn't scream because she was so happy about the conversation they had that day. Also, one senor named Chimame allowed them to talk at times, and Alicia shared her poetry with the new prisoners. Guards thought one of her poems had a secret message about Vasco. When he wouldn't tell them what they wanted, he was killed. Now we're going to talk a bit about the symbols and motifs in the little school.
Okay, hi, it's Ian. I'm going to talk about the motifs in the little school and the recurring symbols. So first, with the motifs, one of the main ones throughout the entire novel was the goal to never give up. Alicia was always choosing a path of light, never darkness. The second major motif we picked up on was the effort to reunite with former life. This can be seen with the matchbox and her child. Alright, so now we're going to go through some of the symbols. So the tooth. So why do you guys think that the tooth was so important?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I guess it just meant that it's something that she cherished a lot, and it kind of like gave her hope to move forward in the little school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Alicia mentions that she has this tooth that had been knocked out by one of the guards, and she's keeping it around. And they gave her this small matchbox to carry it in, and it's really important to her because it's her only true possession in the little school, and it's again reuniting the idea that she's human and never give up and survive. Alright, so the next symbol is the gauze blindfolds. What do they symbolize? Any ideas?
I think they symbolize the guards' power over the prisoners because they weren't allowed to see anything that they were doing, and they have to rely on their senses to survive.
Yeah, that's good.
Good job.
Yeah. Alright, let's move on to the next one. So the plastic flower. Let's see. The plastic flower, it was on her sandals when she got into the little school. And it was a weird symbol of happiness, but also despair for her. But again, it's just reminding her of the better side and choose life over death. Okay, so the water. The water is super important. So what was the significance of the water for the prisoners? What do you guys think?
It kept recurring. I know in the novel.
Yeah, it was certainly a lifeline for all the prisoners. So every time that the water was mentioned in the novel, it was this tool that the prisoners used for like rejuvenation in life, and it gave Alicia something to live for and to keep fighting. And it's also this uncontrolled substance that the guards don't have any control over. So it's a piece of freedom for the rest of the prisoners. Okay, next we got the bread. So, how is it similar to other symbols in the novel?
I think again it's a symbol of life. The prisoners, just like the water was.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought it's definitely like the water, in that tells the prisoners to survive and gives them a reason to keep going, especially Alicia. The only difference that I saw in that was that it's controlled. So the guards ration it, and they can control their prisoners through this sort of lifeline, which is kind of odd. Yeah. So another weird thing though that she did with the bread was she used it as a toy, which I thought was kind of interesting. It was her form of entertainment, which you usually wouldn't think that her bread would be a toy. But yeah, so it's another very significant symbol. So next we'll be going to Shannon. She will be talking about irony and themes.
Hi, I'm Shannon, and I'll be discussing the irony, tone, and themes. Okay, so first of all, irony. From our point of view, the title at first seemed ironic, but as we started discussing the book more, we realized it wasn't very ironic. The little school was used by the military dictatorship to teach them the new norms of the military society. Unlike a school where communication skills develop, at the camp, prisoners were not allowed to talk or communicate in any way, or they would be tortured. This only weakened their communication skills and weakened the dignity of themselves as a whole. Any views or opinions they once had of the military were completely rid from their minds. This was the start of a new military and a new dictatorship. The second thing I'll be talking about is tone. This novel had a very serious tone to it. The narrator told the story of a traumatic time in her life. She spoke of the hardships she had to overcome and how she was able to keep her human dignity even after the guards tried to strip her from that. And lastly, themes. Degradation was among many of the themes. Consistently throughout the narrator's story, she would talk about how the guards tortured and abused the prisoners to strip them of their dignity. The prisoners were not treated as equals or even as people. They were treated inhumanely and were constantly humiliated. Blindness is also another key theme. Prisoners are blindfolded 24 hours of a day during a 7-day week. During these times, prisoners never saw daylight. They were tortured, blindfolded, and even went as far as going to the bathroom blindfolded. Just as these prisoners were blind, people on the outside of these concentration camps were blind to the disappearances and what was going on in these camps. What was amazing was that the narrator was able to draw the floor plan of the camp without even physically seeing what it looked like. Torture is another theme. Throughout the narrator's time at the little school, prisoners were tortured physically and mentally by the guards. Physically, prisoners were beaten and hardly given enough food to survive. Mentally, guards would humiliate and harass the prisoners. The last theme is despair. During the narrator's time in the prison, along with many other prisoners, they were defenseless, helpless, and hopeless. Next, we'll go to Nina.
I'm Nina, and I'm going to be talking about the community and the morals and values of the book. So throughout the novel, Alicia displays a clear sense of community, both when she is in the concentration camp and before, when she was still free. There's a vaguely defined communal structure in the prison, mainly being that the captives are a sort of rebellious community and the guards are trying to tear them apart. The government has tried to tear them apart by destroying the Peronist movement, but now these fellow revolutionaries are together on the inside. There is a structure where cellmates and fellow inmates are neighbors in a sense, and they will protect each other at any lengths. This community is limited to communication through whispers and subtle touching, since they must hide these things from the always watching guards. In many instances, we see new people come into the camp, but they are always welcomed by the other prisoners with bread and warnings of the guards. The roles the prisoners play are somewhat vague, but there seems to be the mother or father-like figures for the prisoners who are older, and then the younger prisoners are, in a way, children that the older ones must watch over and care for. Next, I'll be moving on to the morals and values of the book. A big one is the bread, since bread is basically their only constant possession. The prisoners hold it with the highest value. Alicia feels very strongly about receiving the bread, and the prisoners don't have money or clothes to trade, but they trade the bread instead. It's, in a way, tokens for them. they can show their compassion towards fellow inmates through the bread. And since it is usually the only food they receive throughout the day, giving that extra bread away shows how much they really care for one another in the prison. And it can also be valued as a distraction to waste time during the quiet, lonely day, as Alicia does when she rolls it into the little balls and plays with it. Next is Alicia's tooth, which she not only values but treasures it. And as she says, it is her only non-edible possession, so she protects it in her matchbox. And not only is it an actual object rather than just a piece of food, but it's an object that came off of her. It's her own tooth that she lost, and she says that she does not feel whole without it, in a sense symbolizing how the prisoner is slowly taking away pieces of her, and she needs to try very hard to hold on to them. Names in the book, the names are more than just a word for a person, possibly since the prisoners do not have any possessions. Their names may be more important than they would otherwise be. Alicia talks about how outside of the camp, the Pyrenees had nicknames in order to avoid being found by the government, but inside the camp, she makes sure to never forget her real name, repeating it every day. And the guards actually begin calling her Death, which is never a nice name to be called, so once again, she has to really make sure she remembers her true name. And also, when Graciela is pacing the table, one of the guards asks what she will name her baby, and she acts as if they don't deserve to know. And why would they care what her baby's name is? Because they're very torturous towards the prisoners. And then one of the values the morals of the prisoners is silence during their torture sessions, and in a sense, togetherness and loyalty. There's a special bond between the prisoners that can't be broken by the guards or by any form of reward or indulgence that they try to give them. As much torture that goes on, the prisoners do not talk bad about their cellmates or the other people involved in the movement. And even with bribes, the prisoners stick to their guns and stay loyal to their neighbors. And Alicia also talks about how Graciela has been tortured a lot, and they try to get information out of her, but she never spoke badly about the prisoners or told their other background stories. And this just all shows how strong the bond is between the inmates. And next we'll go to Adam to wrap up the rest of the podcast.
Throughout the podcast, we have discussed a few different themes within the little school, with one of them being life. Whether it was water, bread, or some other seemingly insignificant thing, Partnoy found happiness in it. When it rained, she smiled. Being tortured at a young age is probably one of the worst things someone can go through, but getting out takes courage. Partnoy was literally blinded by a blindfold, but not by life. Imagining her daughter, the flower in the slipper, and the rain falling on her head not only made her feel good, it helped her survive. There are no pieces that we have read so far in this in the class that we took. You guys don't have to worry about that with this book. But there was another novel that we had in mind. The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros dealt with a girl named Esperanza who moved to a new house on Mango Street. After being sexually abused, she hated the place. Much like Partnoy, she could have given up on her life, but learning from the people in her community and by enjoying the small things, she survived and became happy. Each chapter was also divided into different stories about the community around her, much in the same fashion as the little school. When reading this book, we asked ourselves, why was this book necessary for the class that we took, or that we are taking currently? Why do we read any book? It is the connections like that make books so enjoyable to read. The story of the little school is one that makes us understand the world around us and hopefully reminds us to make it better by learning from the mistakes of the world's past. It is books like this one that forces the reader to look at particulars instead of the whole picture. It makes us question our own life and how we live it. Are we really happy with the way we are living? Alicia Partnoy's stories taught us as a group that being happy about the small things makes life meaningful. We thank you again for listening to this episode of CultureCast, and we hope to hear from you. We hope that you hear from us soon. See ya.